got a comment from Serio. Nice.
Oh, nice. Hey, Serio. How you doing? We're live. How is everybody today? Today is a casual conversation, which is why we're all green. I've gone with a green background. Hopefully that's on brand. Calming. Yeah, I like that. Calming. And I'm joined by the disembodied voice of Tusk. Hello, Tusk. How you doing?
Hello.
Hopefully everybody can hear Tusk well. Let us know in chat if you can hear Tusk okay. That would be very appreciated. Let me get chat up, actually. I can't see chat. Oh, do you know what? I need to get my fancy chat overlay thing working again.
Yeah, that was really cool.
Yeah, there's a lot of moving parts to the stream these days, and I need to reduce complexity because it's like preparing for the launch of a rocket ship, like before I stream at the moment, right? And it's not because my stream is so fancy. It's just literally because like I'm so disorganized and there's just so many things that I need to check and get in place. Charisma, hey, how you doing? Nice to see you. Thanks for being here, man. So yeah, like let me get chat up real quick. While I'm doing that, do you want to introduce yourself, Tusk? Do you want to let people know who you are?
Yeah, sure.
That's a horrible. Sorry. Before, can I just apologize for? I totally understand how horrible that question is. It's like when some asshole asks you what kind of music you like, and you're like, "Oh man, like how am I in a couple of sentences? How can I answer that question?"
Let me just do this briefly. Yeah, I'll give you the summarized version.
Give us a thumbnail.
Yeah. Nah, that should be fine. Just let everyone know. Hi, guys. So I go by the name Tusk. That's just my username. Basically, yeah. So I think also in the description it was the point of who I am. So I'm actually Jamaican born. I've been living in the UK for about 7 years, and currently I'm kind of in the middle of all this pandemic nonsense, trying to find new ways to like form connections on Twitch and etc.
That's cool, man. So like the pandemic has been pretty crazy, and I think it's caused a lot of people to suddenly find new ways to communicate and connect with people. We were just talking before the stream about VR chat being like potentially a good way for people to try to replicate human interaction with people, or human interaction with people, as opposed to human interaction with other things. Well, actually, to be honest with you, in VR chat, you're mostly not interacting with humans. You're interacting with sticks of butter or hentai girls. But in any case, Godzilla. So yeah, we met through a few like Twitch streams, I think, and you've always been such a nice guy, and we did a Discord chat and played some code names, I think, recently, and it was super fun. Yeah. So I thought it would be fun to get you in for a conversation, especially as your like life experience seems to be fairly unique, right? Or at least sufficiently different from my own.
That's what I think as well. I mean, even in like within my own like cultural background, I think my experience is quite unique, to be honest.
So tell us about it. So you were born in Jamaica, is that right?
Yeah, that's right. So like for my whole life, I was raised in Jamaica, and then I think somewhere around after I finished high school. Well, yeah, I mean, I should probably just mention, I've like spent so long in the education system. It felt like forever.
Because of moving location, you had to sort of re-engage with it again, or?
Exactly. But right. Not that, but because like education was the reason also why I moved, right? It's kind of harder to afford like a good tuition and pay for it. So, the UK is like really good for that. But yeah, I spent most of my time in education. I did like an undergraduate, and then immediately after that, I had the crazy idea to jump straight into postgrad, and I just did that, and then that was it. And after that, I was like, nah, I think I'm good on education for now.
So you've traveled already a little bit then. So how old were you when you left Jamaica?
I think I was 16.
16.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, so I came here when I was 16, and right now I'm 26.
Wow. So 10 years in the UK.
It is 10 years. Wow. In my head, I was thinking it was 7. but I discount the past 2 years because that's,
because they're not real. They
yeah,
didn't really
exactly.
happen.
They didn't exist.
That's cool. So why did you just travel? Did your family move from Jamaica or what?
It was me at first, because my mom's kind of British, right? And then
Okay.
like my dad's on the Jamaican side, so
Mhm.
it was kind of like a one by one step of all my family members, at least close family, moving in. So now we kind of just, all of us are here now.
Oh wow. Okay. Cool.
Yeah.
So how's that been? So 16. I remember when I grew up in I spent my whole life in England, and I remember moving schools when I was 7 years old, and not really understanding, but only in retrospect, sort of reflecting on how disorientating that experience was at the age of 7.
Hmm.
And they say that you should try to do that before 7 because it's very difficult. I can imagine at 16, like, I
Yeah.
can't imagine what it must have been like at 16.
Yeah, that was one of the concerns like my parents had, right? Because there's this kind of stigma, or not stigma, like this concern of like young Jamaican boys who move from Jamaica to the UK, and that usually happens like, I don't know, yeah, like you said, when they're young, like 7, 6, and then they grow up in the actual UK institution, right? But then they kind of change their values, and it's kind of, how do I describe it? They move more towards a materialistic side, and then it might lead to something else. I don't know, gangs, for example.
Gotcha.
But yeah, it's usually like a negative stigma towards it.
Hey, the bloody nine. How you doing, buddy? How's it going, Joe? That is interesting. So in Jamaica, the feeling would be like the West is more materialistic in principle. Is that a fair way of saying it?
Yeah, I'd say that's an okay way of saying it. Yeah.
And so moving at 16, there was some concern that you'd suddenly become deeply materialistic and just see.
Yeah.
Why gangs? That seems, because materialism and gang membership don't necessarily seem to go together.
More like yeah, I probably shouldn't say gangs, to be honest.
That's cool.
I mean, there's all sorts of interactions you can make when you come to the UK at that age. But I think it's more like you kind of lose your values of actually wanting to seek something more than just like having money. I don't know, which isn't a problem, right? But you kind of lose those values that I've kind of been taught up, raised and brought up on, right? Like it's like you gotta have an education, you gotta do this, you gotta have a certain amount of knowledge. You must become a doctor or something like that, lawyer, that kind of thing, right, that you actually usually see in Asian cultures as well. Right? But yeah, I'd say that's one of the principles that they have in Jamaica. Really,
work hard, you get it.
Yeah, work hard, exactly.
Do well, yeah. That's it. It is true. It's there's a lot of people talking about this issue of Asian families is usually the go-to reference, but they tend to do incredibly well academically. But that's just because they sacrifice and they work bloody hard, and the truth is most people in the West probably don't sacrifice nearly as much. They sort of feel it's owed to them in some way, I think. Gross generalization that is, but it definitely seems to be there's significant cultural differences. And there are pros and cons as well. I mean, some of the harm that's done, I think, by pushing children to achieve can be dramatic and have, frankly, fatal consequences and extremes. But then, at the other end of the scale, you don't want to breed a culture of people that feel that they're owed success by virtue of them just being born somehow, and that they don't need to push for it. So leaving Jamaica at 16, it must have been a tough decision. Like, I mean, you must have friends there in Jamaica, and you must have had relationships and things that you were leaving behind. I mean, I can imagine no matter where you were going, that just the idea of leaving where you are is already an emotionally challenging idea. So what was it that inspired you?
Especially at 16, right? You've like gone through high school, you've made all these relationships and friends, I think for me, it was actually kind of tough, like moving. Like I actually, in my head, somewhere in my head, I developed this idea that I was actually going back to
So,
live in Jamaica.
oh, okay. So it was just a
Right?
temporary thing.
Yeah, I thought it was just gonna pop over to UK, get a degree and head back. But it's like as you stay here, things change. Life changes, and it's the kind of thing you don't think about when you're 16 or 17.
Right.
But plans change and people change, and then you kind of like you have these connections and friends, but you don't really like keep in contact with the people that you know, but at the same time you still know them. It's this weird disconnect. I don't know how to describe it properly, but yeah.
I mean, I can't say that it's been easy for me, even living in the same country, to maintain the same friendship groups that I had when I was 16. I think, between the ages of, let's say, 16 and 21, you're going to be a radically different person at the end of those, few years.
Yeah.
And it isn't necessarily, I think, guaranteed that you're going to maintain friendships that you had when you were 16, beyond those formative years. But yeah, so you came across to the UK on your own at 16 then? So how did that
work? No. Is just like my mom was like up here and then I was there. Yeah. So it's kind of like me going by myself to like live with my mom kind of situation.
Gotcha. Okay.
And then, but yeah, I think in my head, I kind of just eventually came to accept the fact that, this is my life now.
Right.
And I kind of just moved forward from there.
Does the UK feel like home to you?
See, no, this is something I think about, right? I don't think of the UK as a home, right? But at the same time, I don't know if I could still call Jamaica my home.
Right.
Because I've like spent so long away from there. So I'm kind of like in this weird limbo of like, I don't know where exactly I can call home. But I kind of just refer to it as like wherever like the people who were closest to me are, right?
Right.
Yeah. So in a way, England is sort of feels like home, but at the same time, Jamaica is also my home. So I have two homes.
You either have two homes or no home, I guess, depending on how you feel about it. Yeah. And I can imagine it could feel like either one of those two things in different moments. Do you feel like if you went back to Jamaica, I mean, have you been back to Jamaica in the intermediary 10 years?
I've been back twice. And it's very kind of sad situation. Like I've been the two times that I've been back, I've gone with the intention of actually just visiting family, but it's actually just turned out to be funerals.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So that usually happens, but yeah, I kind of just put off going back because that kind of just, I don't know if I took it as a sign.
So you're going back just to visit family, but then there just happens to be the need to stay for a funeral. Is that what?
Exactly.
Oh my gracious!
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
You're the Miss Marple of Jamaica. Every time you turn up somewhere, there's a murder. That's sorry, that was needless.
No, that's definitely that.
So how do you feel like about when you're in Jamaica again, like after being away for so long? Do you feel like, does it feel familiar, or it's, the longest I've spent out of this country has been frame rate with the camera potentially. Oh really? That's
weird. I see.
Am I frame ratey? Oh, I am. That's weird.
Sort of. Yeah.
Thank you for that. Let me see if I can. That would have bugged the hell out of me later on, but luckily it won't affect the quality of the conversation. The longest time I've been out of the country has been the 6 months I spent in Japan, and I really felt that even after just 6 months, returning to the UK felt slightly like it had shifted underneath me somehow. Like I no longer could quite understand what was going on.
Yeah.
Because of course, it's like, getting into some water and having the temperature turned up slowly. You don't notice the change. when you're there. But then if you just take 6 months away and come back again, you'll suddenly realize that everything is slightly shifted somehow, and you can't quite put your finger on how. I can
Yeah.
only imagine from your perspective how much stronger that must have felt like.
Yeah, Jamaica feels very strange to me. Like I'm very estranged from whatever's happening over there now. Like whatever I hear about is only from relatives, and then like if I do go over on the rare occasion I do, obviously there's funerals, but
Mm,
like other than that, it's this weird disassociation kind of feeling
mm.
sometimes. That's kind of weird for me, right? Because that's where I was born and raised, right?
Well, people talk about their family home, right? They talk about where they grow up, and and like when you hear people talk about those things, it's like this constant in their life. Like I don't even know if it's really true, but there's like a myth of home, I think, and a myth of childhood that it needs to feel and should be feeling a certain way. And when your
Mm,
story doesn't match that feeling, I think it can be very disorientating,
yeah,
because you're trying to relate to it in the way that you've almost been taught you should be able to relate to it. But of course, then that crashes against reality, and that might not be quite so easy. Um, yeah, I think that's interesting.
yeah.
Do you feel like when you're going back, do people treat you differently?
See, it's been such a long time, but do people treat me differently? Hmm. Honestly, I can't remember. But yeah, I think people will easily recognize you as a foreigner.
Oh, really? So
Yeah,
you'll be treated like a foreigner now in, in
yeah,
Jamaica?
yeah, exactly.
Oh,
Yeah, and I
wow.
think like the perception is, if you've gone overseas, you've like moved on to a better life.
Oh,
Uh,
wow. Is that?
because like because the situation in Jamaica is kind of
Mm,
like it's under not the best management from government,
mm,
and there's a lot of poverty, there's a lot of crime. But I think once you've most, if not like I'd say 90-80% of the people that have moved to Jamaica that I know, or the people that I grew up with, have moved from Jamaica to like another country,
right.
mainly the U.S. actually.
Mm,
But I think the perception is once you've actually moved on, you've like moved on to a better life.
wow. That's
That's kind of
sad.
the
I mean, it must
I know
be.
it is, yeah.
Hmm. That's
But
interesting.
that's one of the views. But at the same point, it's not to say that there aren't people in Jamaica who are actually trying to like do a good job and make the most of what they have there.
Hmm.
You know, because there's a lot that it has to offer, Jamaica.
It's very difficult, I think, to make I mean, all we can ever do is, I think, make statements on the basis of our own experience, right? Like,
Yeah,
I don't think, as someone who's spent, pretty much his entire life in the UK, and as a white Englishman, I don't know how typical my experience is. Like, I don't know England, right? Like, how can you know a country? It's too strange a concept. It's certainly the one I'm the most familiar with, um,
yeah,
and least surprised by, perhaps. But I can't really say that I know what the mood of a country is and what it's like. I can't say I've visited England even. Like, there's the percentage of England that I have visited is likely to have be terrifyingly small.
yeah. Likewise.
But when you travel, it's almost like you suddenly are an ambassador for an entire geographic area
Yeah,
that.
exactly. That's a good point to make. Yeah, yeah. I definitely know for absolute fact, I can't speak to I don't know 80% of Jamaica because I've only spent most of my life in about the rest 20% of it. Right. I've like traveled to only the places that where my family are, and like it's not like I'm a tourist that's like walking on every map to map. Right.
Gotcha. Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. Do you know what this occurs to me, and entirely up to you, Joe. But if you want to jump onto this call, because I know Joe is a Australian who moved to Canada.
Okay.
And that wouldn't be the same exact experience for sure. But Joe, if you fancy jumping on, you'd be more than welcome. Just let me know in chat, and I'll send
Yeah.
you a link over Discord.
Most welcome. Yeah.
So yeah, I think Joe's a lovely guy, and he asks he asks the questions that I want to ask, but he just frames them so much better than I would. It's very annoying. So yeah, I think so Jamaica clearly is changing. Your relationship to Jamaica is changing. So I guess the next question is like, really, how would you describe your relationship to the UK? I mean, you say it doesn't feel like it's your home. You don't feel. What do you think would make it your home? Like, what would change? What would need to change for you to be able to say that the UK is your home? Or do you just think that's not something you could ever see yourself feeling?
No, I think there's a close relationship with like having like ties or close ties. I can't say I have like close friends here in the UK. You know, like people that I've trusted, like best friends, like I would have had when I was in Jamaica. But I think that's a good part in it, and also like I think I'm at the stage where I'm not in the stage of my life where I've like like set up a good foundation, right? Not like having a house and etc. But I think those kind of things of like having, I'd say, on the material side, or the having a house and like having a substantial stake, or having somewhere to call home is a good thing, and also people that you can talk to, or just a family of your own. A family of your own, right? I think
Yeah.
that's probably a good way to call it. So I'd say that would be the point where I'd say England's kind of my home.
That's a very good answer. I think one thing throughout my life, I've traveled and moved around quite a lot, and as an adult, a young adult, like I would move to different locations for work, and other reasons, and basically found that it's very difficult once you become disconnected from your almost like social context.
Right.
People assume that you've got friends, that you know people, that if you are clearly living and working somewhere, that people assume lots of things about your social dynamics that may very well not be true.
Yeah,
but because of those assumptions, it people are not used to making sort of new social connections, or feel like the thing that used to get me was like people just genuinely are, the moment they realize that you don't have anybody else around you, like any other friends around you, that's a warning sign to other people. right.
Yeah, they take that as this guy might have some characteristic about him. He's a dick, basically.
There's got to be a reason why he hasn't got anybody better than me. So one of the things, as a guy, I used to try to go to the local pub and sit down occasionally on a stool and talk to the barmaid who would be frankly paid to at least engage in some menial conversation with people. But as a guy, if you were talking to girls, then there's always that kind of discomforting feeling that they might be concerned that you're hitting on them, and if you talk to guys, well, there's the same, to be frank. And then secondarily, like the moment they realize that you need to talk to them because there's nobody else for you to talk to, there's that concern that I would totally share, I suspect, that you're worried that you'll get caught in this conversation with them, and then you're somehow responsible for this conversation with this random stranger that you didn't choose to get into. It's difficult, but all of those sorts of things make it incredibly difficult when you relocate from somewhere and you don't have an existing friendship network. It's actually terrifyingly difficult to get started on a ladder like that, on a social.
100%. Yeah, I've kind of just based my like social friendships on the people I meet in my uni days, right? And like those are the only connections I have, really.
Yeah,
because that's kind of where I've always been. So that's kind of how I did it. I wouldn't say I've like reached out to the pubs and stuff. Like, I haven't gone down to my local pub or anything, but
I don't necessarily recommend it. What I did discover, obviously pandemic allowing, what I did discover like in much later life when it was no use to me, but things like meetup groups, for example, meetup.com and going to meetup groups with people that share a common interest, clubs and sporting events, those kinds of things, or even just like amateur dramatic groups, or just anything that's got a focus that isn't necessarily just you and the other person. There's a reason why you're there, that they can give you context. I think that makes a massive difference to
definitely a common interest, right?
100%, yeah. And it's the same online, but also I think on the internet has grown to become a place where real meaningful social interactions can happen. And I've not well before the pandemic. I mean, I was an internet entity before it was cool. But it has now become a place where you can genuinely meet people. I mean, just mentioning Joe now and your good self, and myriad other people that I've never met and considered if I couldn't say close friends, I could certainly say people for whom I care about, who I met online. And what really is a friend if not that? I'd say like I would be sad to hear about some of these people if misfortune befell them, and I think that's as good a guide to whether somebody's a friend or not.
Is that, do you think that's enough then? Like the people that you meet, right, to explicitly kind of put it out there that you are friends, right? What do you classify? How do you classify someone that you've met online? Granted, of course, is an anonymity. I don't know if that's
an anonymity. There's anonymousness.
Exactly. Okay. That anonymousness, that goes on with like internet interactions, like myself, right? I mean, it's like, how do you establish that, right? That's something that's always been kind of vague for me.
Well, one question might be like, how would an online friendship be different from a real world friendship, right? They tell you a name, and the difference between your username and a real name is only just that you somehow believe one to be more real, but really a username is just as real as any other type of name. It's just a sound that we make to refer to somebody, right? So so the need for a real name is sort of irrelevant, right? And then the next part, I think, is just, I think it's important to recognize that friendship is not friendship neither needs to be nor necessarily will be reciprocated. Like I can care about somebody and think that they're important in my life, but they might not feel the same way about me. And I think that it's important to recognize that you choose who are your friends, but they might choose differently.
Right.
And in some ways it doesn't make either selection invalid, I'd say. I think I consider those people, I mean, people have talked about the idea that you can only have something like 7 friends, like real friends or something, like meaningful friends, like human beings are just not capable of deep relationships with more than...
There's no memory in the memory space.
Yeah, something like that. Yeah, like in order to properly manage and maintain and look after a genuine, real, deep friendship, like it's a significant investment. It's kind of a bit like a relationship. Well, I mean, it is a relationship, but it's kind of like a romantic relationship in some ways, right? It needs to be cared for and nurtured somewhat. You need to find the right person that just happens to have the weird psychological profile, just weird enough to fit comfortably into your psychological profile. But like, I think the reality is that people for whom you choose to consider to be important to you, I think we would say that that's a friend, right? Somebody you care about. And I think that's the only difference. Like I would, for example, I would consider you a friend on the basis of, I would be genuinely sad if something bad happened to you. Like that would be something I would be concerned about. I would be moved to try to help you if I needed to, right? Those kinds of emotions come, whereas they wouldn't come with anybody I'd met online. And yet we don't know each other very well. You know, we've interacted only a handful of times, but I've just never been disappointed by our interactions, right?
On that basis.
But it's a difficult thing, right? Because getting that dynamic wrong can be very awkward, I think, because there are people who you can tell are reaching out and want to be friends and wanting to connect, and even online you see people repelling against that and being concerned about, why do you want to be my friend? Why what are you selling? What are you trying to do? What's wrong with you that you need me as a friend? Oscar Wilde once said, I'd never want to be a member of a club that would have me as a member. And I think some people genuinely feel almost the same way about their friendship dynamics. Anybody who would want me to be a friend with them probably doesn't have much taste. So So how about yourself? Like, how do you evaluate friendships within your dynamic? Because I think, again, there is a story that we tell each other. Sorry, I have this horrible habit of asking a question, and then what I think I'm doing is clarifying it, but what I'm actually doing is probably just answering my own question. But let me just say this real quick, is that the TV show Friends, right? Mm-hmm. I think that idea of friendship is frankly demonstrably toxic. Like, the idea that that's how friendship should work and be and feel like, I think it's very much the kind of myth of the friendship dynamic as young adults, right? And I also suspect, just like the myth of home and the myth of a lot of things that we have, I don't think it meets reality very often, and I think the absence of it meeting reality and the prevalence of the myth makes people feel bad about themselves unnecessarily.
I think I have a good point to actually make. Like, with something that happened actually very, very recently is like, so I used to work at like a part-time job, right, in this like a wholesale shop, like a counter job, a customer service, right? And one of my supervisors, right, she's like many years older than me, but she kind of she took care of me, right? And I think like she also had a Jamaican background, and there was like that thing that we shared. And I would consider her a friend, because of like the fact that we had that connection and we shared a mutual upbringing, and we had these commonalities, and she's helped me out, I've helped her out. And like recently, because I've left that job like, I don't know, 4 years ago, and then like out of the blue, like I don't actually keep in contact with her, but recently, and then like out of the blue, she messaged me saying that she needs help because she's stuck in Jamaica and her family's like scammed her.
Oh,
but basically, and she kind of needs help with money, right? So like in my head, I'm like kind of contemplating.
Wow.
I like, in my head, that's fine. If that's something that she needs help with, I'm genuinely concerned for her because she's in a bad position. Her ticket isn't available until March, right? So till she can come back to the UK. So like in my head, I'd consider her a friend, but like at the same time, I don't think I've ever been in a position where someone's actually asked me for money, which is strange, right? Has anyone ever asked you for money?
Yeah, but that's if you don't mind, that seems suspicious.
It is suspicious, right? Like, you just get a random WhatsApp message from like out of nowhere.
How do you know it's her? Would be one question.
That's something I'm trying to confirm.
And then another thing would be like, even if it is her, like, it's going to be, why would she choose you to reach out to? Like,
exactly,
of all the people she could possibly reach
I wouldn't say we're that close at the same time as well, right? But at the same time, I do consider her a friend. So
and I think sometimes friends need help, and I think that I think that's incredibly difficult thing to navigate. Like, if you were in the same situation, would you feel that you could reach out to her with the same request?
Yeah, I don't think I could.
Yeah,
Yeah, I mean, I only because I'm like the kind of person that doesn't like relying on other people.
right.
Yeah.
And are there other ways potentially that she could solve her problem?
Mm, I honestly don't know. Not until I actually speak to her in person, not
Yeah,
on the phone. Like, I
yeah.
don't think I can like ascertain anything that's going on. But I mean, that was just an example of like
It's very difficult. Yeah, yeah.
one
You
of the,
the impulse to help is strong, but then also because of that, you
exactly.
yeah.
But yeah, those are the. I mean, I consider people friends on the fact that we've like had some kind of common relationship, and
Mm.
whoever I've talked to. I mean, even though I don't talk to the person, because I'm kind of really horrible with keep upkeep of like keeping in contact with friends. Like they're always the ones to reach out to me. It's like, hey, do you want to go drinking sometime? Yeah, sure. But yeah, those are the kind of people I'd consider friends. Just whoever I've grown up with or met along the way.
I think that one of the things I definitely notice is there are people for whom I will not speak to for months on end, maybe even years on end, you know, and just for whatever reason, just the regularity of contact isn't there. But then you do make contact, and it's just like it's just like you pick up exactly where you left off. Like the friendship is just it's not really the friendship. It's just more that I guess it's a personality compatibility, right? Like
Mm.
after a very brief session of catching up, you feel like you're both back on the same page with each other. I think in many ways, friendship's about a sort of comfort level with somebody that you can trust them, and you to a certain extent maybe even can predict how they might react to things, so that you can, or at least you've got a gauge for them,
Yeah.
so that if they react a certain way, that you can contextualize that with what you expect, and therefore use that as a kind of mirror to understand how strong their reaction really is to what you've just said, you know. So it's like somebody
Mm.
you've calibrated for almost in some ways.
Yeah.
But also just people who you like, I think, and just you feel some kindred spiritness with, just somebody who I think you can feel as if you wish there were more people like that in the world. For example, that could be one thing. Like you would
Yeah.
like to see more people be like this, or you feel empathy for them, and because of your own experiences, for example, that could be another reason. But yeah, in terms of then the moment then the rubber meets the road and the wallet comes out, then that's a very difficult situation. And I would be my recommendation would be to very strongly err on the side of caution here.
Yeah.
Like I think if she really is a friend, she'll understand
Yeah.
why caution is there, and if she's not,
there,
then
I mean, yeah,
it was a mistake to begin with. Yeah.
pretty much.
That's tough, man. That is tough. That is very tough. So we talked about it. So the topic of this conversation is labeled sort of rather boldly culture and ethnicity. So
Yeah.
how is being as a Jamaican living in the UK? How is I don't know, how is that relationship? Because my only experience of being a non-native, as it were, was being a British guy in Japan, which was really interesting to me as an experience, but I don't think it's in any way comparable.
Okay. Have you ever been to any Caribbean island or
I haven't.
like on that side?
You can see the stream. I'm ginger. I'm paler than pale. I find it really hard to deal with the heat. I swear to God, if I went to Jamaica, I would literally burst into flames. Although lots of the Caribbean islands, they look so beautiful. I would love to go. I would genuinely love to go, but I would just die.
You just melt as soon as you
People
steps off the airplane.
People tell me about all kinds of places that they're from around the world, and they all sound amazing and beautiful and culturally rich and great. And I would genuinely love to travel more, but the sun is not my friend.
Cultural wise, I'd say like the UK is the UK has some pretty, at least in London, as far as I know, and wait, actually, I should say this, right? So in Jamaica, there's this motto. It's the national motto. It says, "Out of many, one people," and that's kind of like stems from the fact that there's like Jamaica's very culturally. I wouldn't say very, but to some extent, it's really diverse. And so most of the times, I would actually compare London's like ethnic background to be very similar to Jamaica in that there's a lot of people from different ethnicities,
Mm,
but at the same time, they're still Jamaican in Jamaica. So in the
mm,
UK, you have like people who probably Pakistani or I don't know Chinese or some Asian background, and also
mm.
like other countries, African. In the Jamaica, it's the same, but you've kind of been born in Jamaica. Uh,
Gotcha.
what I'm trying to like go with here is like I didn't feel much of a disconnect from Jamaican culture when I actually moved to the UK, only
That's cool.
because there's just so much of it embedded here in London already.
Mm. Is it not explicitly necessarily Jamaican culture, but just multiculturality as a principle being
Yeah,
both present in Jamaica
yeah,
and well, it
yeah,
is,
yeah,
and it is
yeah,
very London that is multicultural. The UK, I think, in
yeah,
general, isn't that multicultural, but I do think London is.
definitely. Yeah,
I like quoting it occasionally. It's not a very charitable view of anything, particularly, but the beginning of A Study in Scarlet by Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, which was the story that gave birth, excuse me, that gave birth to Sherlock Holmes.
hmm.
John Watson describes London as the open sewer to which all of the drains of Europe eventually empty their contents. But but even in that, like he did that, he sort of made that comment with affection. You know, there's something affectionately multicultural and melting
Yeah,
pot and messy, but it's not romanticized. I think by many. I think London sort of confronts its multiculturality. One of the questions might be like, and I'm interested because it's very difficult for me to gauge. But my view of London is that it's not as multi. There are multiple cultures present, but in general, London itself isn't multicultural. Does that make a sense? Like there are lots of cultures there,
hmm.
but they're not. There's not a sort of blending of the rainbow, if you will.
Ultimately, everything is just British.
Well, no, it's more like I think there was a really brilliant documentary which I'll try and find and post to the Deviant Robot Discord server at some point. But it was a really interesting documentary about how it was somebody who was actually a cultural advisor to the UK government at one point. But he was talking about how he grew up in London. And he said that you knew where the Jewish quarter was, where the Indian quarter was, where the Asian quarter was. You know, you could point to where these groups would be, and it was an open secret that essentially, whilst there are multiple cultures, it wasn't implicitly multicultural.
Okay.
Do you get a sense of that, or do you feel like it's much more? Is it becoming much more diverse?
I kind of get what you mean. I mean,
Yeah,
in my
sorry, that
opinion,
wasn't very
yeah,
well expressed. Go on.
yeah, no, in my opinion, at least from my viewpoint, London's very multicultural, but that's kind of coming uh, from my perspective, where I've only
Mm,
known Jamaican culture, and then I come over here and I'm getting introduced to like a bunch of different cultures
right.
where I probably wouldn't have known any of about that other than what I'd read on Wikipedia, for example, if I was still living in Jamaica, right?
Gotcha.
So, so like from that viewpoint, it seems multicultural to me, at least on the outside surface. But I mean, like
Yeah.
you say, right, it might be not the case.
I mean, again, we're always in this awkward position of trying to be an ambassador for something we can only barely understand ourselves, right? And so, you know the bit of London that you operate in, and the people that you know, and you can only reflect on that,
Yeah,
right? But I
yeah,
think it's probably quite true. I mean, I suspect that the multiculturality is. I guess what I'm trying to suggest would be that there could be lots of cultures present,
Mm-hmm.
but they don't mix, essentially, or they don't. There isn't a space where it's all genuinely multicultural. It's just that there's you know, I don't
It's
know.
just that there's different cultures. So
Yeah.
there's like there's a segregate, or not segregate, I would say. There's like a separation still.
Yes. Yeah.
They don't fully blend.
And that's a real problem in a lot of large cities, because essentially when people arrive, they want to be around other people that they might not even like them necessarily, but they would feel more comfortable around people they think they can understand from the similar cultural, moral, ethical, historical background, right? And so even if they don't really like the people, they would still rather be closer to people that are more similar to them. And I get that, because I think in many ways, like, I think what we want to be around mostly, just in the same way as we talked about with friendship groups, is I think we want to be around people who we feel we can at least predict reasonably accurately. Like, it would be alarming to be in a place where people around us were unpredictable, which is why moral issues, I think, become so difficult for people, because if somebody does share a different moral framework from us, it immediately puts them in a category of being very hard to predict. I don't know what you might do in this situation, and it might not be what I think you should do in this situation, and that makes me uncomfortable.
You don't know, and you don't know if what that person does is going to be something that's offensive to you.
Yeah, so you're or dangerous even. Yeah, all kinds of things. I mean, this is the problem with unpredictability, is you don't then know how bad it could be, right? Because of its nature. And so I can very much understand why groups that move to a city would like to more likely move to areas where people with similar value sets and similar heritages and backgrounds will be, and therefore and then of course there's less pressure to necessarily move out of those groups, right? And sort of wander into the spaces that are a bit more. I mean, this is clearly not everybody. So just, I mean, the accusation I can always hear, not everybody, but no statement is everybody, right? Like, I made one statement literally on the last stream that I think you could justifiably say about everybody, which is that every one of your ancestors fucked at least once.
Yeah.
But that's about it, right? That's about all I can say of everybody. But the truth is, like, I do think that seems to be happening, and it has happened for a very long time. And in fact, it even becomes self-sustaining after a period of time. Shops and services and sort of infrastructure subtly shifts within these regions to make them much more, in line with the cultural expectations of the groups. And so, multiculturality isn't this, having multiple cultures in a space is not the same as that space being multicultural. I think that's what I'm trying to suggest.
You're definitely right. Like, people stick to their niches, right? I think for my knowledge, Brixton is like one of the central hubs for like Caribbean and African culture, right? And that's kind of like the one local region of London that I've been to, only because it's like related closely to Jamaican culture, right? And people stick to their niches, etc.
Brixton's also awesome, though.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I cannot doubt that.
I love Brixton. Oh man, I'm having flashbacks to street food in Brixton, and it's so good. Like, Brixton Academy is a fantastic music venue. If you've never been, I strongly recommend it. And I've definitely come out of Brixton Academy when it's just absolutely drenched in sweat, completely exhausted, so hungry, and then you just know that you would, if it comes to it. This is one of those situations where even I might eat at McDonald's, but you just don't want to. You want to eat something good, and oh my god, sometimes they sell the most amazing food in Brixton. Like, the street food can be just off the charts. So when you find some smiling guy with a thing frying in front of him and sizzling vegetables and falafels and like kind of crazy stuff, and so good. Anyway, that's a weird flashback for me then. But I think I wish, in many ways, I wish I understood this better, or had a better sense of this, this idea of what it must be like to be a Jamaican in England, only because I think in one of the things that I think was interesting about traveling around Japan was just that, of course, spending enough time in a place, that contrast really allows you to see your home in a certain way, right? Like you begin to notice the things that you don't miss,
Yeah.
and even some of the things that you might miss,
Yeah.
and then reflect on the value of those things quite earnestly. And I think what do you feel, if anything, and I wouldn't be offended if the answer was not
Yeah.
much, but is there anything in the UK specifically that you think, culturally, that would be, is better than Jamaica, and vice versa? Like, I mean, and better obviously being a relative statement, but like, what things do you value in the UK, and what things do you wish the UK was more like Jamaica in?
I think the things that I value, I mean, obviously this is like centralized towards my life in London, right? But uh, the things that I value is like this openness of discussion. There isn't a lot of that in Jamaica, but at the same time, I think with Jamaica, if I was to like draw a comparison between that whole idea of having openness to conversation, Jamaica's more carefree. Like, but at the same time, there isn't a lot of open space for like discussions of this for you to have like conversations with people who have different like beliefs and backgrounds. So I
Mm,
think everything is more centralized towards. So Jamaicans actually very very Christian, like centralized, right? And of course that's kind of like what my beliefs also align to, but
mm,
it's kind of like you're not able to share your views with other people who might not have that belief or share the same belief. So I
right.
think the one thing about UK that's really good is the fact that you're able to have those kind of conversations without
Mm.
like any worries of people like disagreeing with you to that extent that they do something.
So greater religious tolerance in the UK.
Yeah, yeah,
Gotcha.
yeah.
That's interesting. You've mentioned religion now. You know what you were doing. That's a red. It's a red flag
I,
to a
I,
bull.
yeah, I knew what I was doing. Yeah,
I have to ask. So did you grow up Christian? Would you say?
yeah, yeah. I grew up Christian.
And if you don't mind me asking, are you still Christian?
I wouldn't consider myself Christian, or
Okay.
I wouldn't consider myself religious, basically.
Hmm.
But I do have a belief in God and
Okay.
like an afterlife.
Oh, interesting. Could we talk about that?
Yeah, sure. I mean, why not?
So cards on the table. Like, I'm sure as you know, I'm an atheist.
Yeah.
So could you describe, why do you believe that there's a God? What reasons do you have for believing there's a God?
I think in my experience, I've always like correlated the things that happened to me in my life with like so I always like believe that there's a direct correlation with the things that are good and bad. So, for example, there's like this thing, praying, right?
Mm-hmm.
That they teach, and you pray to God, you share your thoughts and your wishes and what you want for your life. But at the same time, I kind of like correlated those things with, if I am praying and I am like getting those wishes like granted, then there must be some higher power out there that's actually listening to me, if that makes sense.
So
Yeah.
so would you say that you have prayed and have had those prayers answered?
Yeah, 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 and it's also the fact that that's kind of what I've been brought up on. It's a
Mm,
very stringent like family kind of thing, and it's very widespread in Jamaica as well. Historically, Christianity, you know,
mm.
and that belief is just shared and spread. And the one problem I had with it was it felt more like a mandatory thing. There
Mm,
wasn't really a stretching of the why you're doing this. It was kind of like, your parents are doing it. You got to go to church on Sunday. You
mm.
got to dress nice. You got to act a certain way. And there wasn't like a lot of thoughts on why you're actually doing what you do. So I think I've kind of reached a point where I've just adopted an open-endedness to it, where I just decide what my faith is and what my beliefs are.
Sure.
Yeah.
That's cool. And that I think is necessary for everybody. I think I can understand how it gets confused with culture quite often.
Yeah.
And yeah, like I think there are lots of believers out there that have been brought up, told to believe it, that had to sort of go through some rediscovery of it. And even if, you know, they may have come out the other end of that rediscovery no longer believing it, or
Mm.
perhaps believing it on at least now on their own basis. But I suspect
Yeah.
this whole you will believe this thing doesn't work for many people for very long, you know.
Yeah.
So you're not, you say you're not religious, but you do believe that there's a God. Is that right?
Yes. Yep. Yep.
And can I ask? And this is moving. We're going to do like a little mini SE conversation now, because this is like exactly what SE is designed to talk for. Are you familiar with SE at all?
Street
Epistemology.
Yep.
Epistemology. Yeah. So the question that we would ask in street epistemology would be what's your confidence in the claim that there is a God?
We're talking like percentage or
Like
more descriptive.
whatever you feel comfortable with, but usually it's like out of 100. Normally people would say roughly, is, you know, you can answer to even if you want to round it up to 5 decimal places, that's fine.
Okay. No, I'd say, let's go with 85.
85. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Gotcha. So you're 85% confident that there is a God.
Yeah.
And what makes you so confident? 85 is quite a high rate. So what gives you such confidence in that there is a God?
Confidence. I wouldn't say I'm confident. More like I've kind of based it on the fact that I want to believe that there is a God.
Okay.
Because I think that the opposite just feels a bit too sad, right?
Okay.
At least in my head, the opposite, you know, of not believing it just feels like I'm betraying somebody or betraying God in that sense. That's what I feel. So I've kind of like come up with this arbitrary of 85 where I'm like, oh, I want to believe, but at the same time, uh, there's so many things that I question myself as well, right?
Gotcha.
So yeah, that's kind of how I ended up with that number.
So could we maybe make 2 numbers? One might be how much you want to believe and how much you do believe. Would that be something?
Yeah, yeah, something like that. I mean, if that's the case, then I'd say it's a 50-50, right?
In terms
In,
of
not believing.
okay,
And then
gotcha. Okay.
yeah.
So your 85% would be like how much you want to believe, but like you're 50-50 on whether it is really true or not.
Yeah.
Okay, gotcha. And why do you think that you have your 50% that you think it might be true? Why do you think you feel that it might be true?
Why do I feel it might be true? Because how can I'd have to draw from examples.
That's cool.
So like my own experience, I've usually, like, in times of trouble or whatever, there's very little to rely on in terms of people.
Mm-hmm.
I kind of just rely on, I don't know, some advice that comes from, I don't know, one of my family members or my grandma. She's very religious.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, whatever feedback she'd give me in terms of like praying, and then usually from that result, whatever the outcome is from me praying, you know, that usually comes to a good result, right? And that's not to say that it's also not also from my efforts, but sometimes things that I can't explain happen in my life, and it just doesn't make sense. That's kind of how I explain it.
Sure. Okay. That makes sense to me. So when you pray, that after you've prayed to God, you notice that things tend to improve. Sometimes through your own efforts, and sometimes things happen that you can't quite explain. And these things make this leads you to be 50% confident that God is that there is a God.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So I guess that we might say that there are two types of things then. One is praying that leads to you then doing something, which results in a resolution, and then praying which leads to something external to you. Is it possible that your prayers that lead you to do something to resolve the problem would work even if there was no God?
Yeah, that possibly. I mean, for sure. Yeah, that's something, because I mean, I don't pray all the time, right? So I feel like I only do it in times of desperation,
right?
Or when there's like nothing else to turn to. So yeah, I'd say that's definitely is also true.
So for those times where you've used prayer, because lots of people use things like, for example, meditation, for example, to think and reflect on their problems. And sometimes through that time that you take to sort of sit down and reflect on those problems can be very, very helpful psychologically to both feeling better and finding a resolution. And it sounds like we could say that even if there was no God, that would you say that the results of prayer in that case would be any different to just meditating?
Would I say no? Yeah, I'd say it's more or less the same. The part that would probably explain the other bit would be where things happen that you can't explain. But this whole like idea of what you want to grasp, right? What you want to, why do I want to believe? If I were to say why I want to believe, I'd say it mostly comes down to not wanting to. No, nah. I was about to say not wanting to go to hell, right? But that doesn't make sense in my head, to be honest.
It does make sense in some ways. I mean, that's been a persuasive argument to lots of people.
Yeah, lots of people, but I don't agree with that, right? I think it's more like a life choice.
Like a life choice.
Something that you what's the word? Like a conviction. Something that you just genuinely want to believe in, and that's like your core belief, because you want to put your trust in something, right? I use the word trust, but in like Christianity related, it'd be faith, right?
Okay.
But you wanna put something as your core foundation that kind of defines why you do the things that you do on a daily basis. What kind of defines your morals, right? Gotcha. And that's kind of how I base it as for why I believe in God.
Could let's just could God through religion define your morals even if that God didn't exist? So sorry, let me rephrase that because that was a very stupidly worded question. Could a religious, let's say a religious upbringing, inform your morals even if the God wasn't real?
Yes. Yeah.
And
from my perspective, yeah.
And could somebody who didn't believe in God still have good moral values and intuitions?
Yeah, 100%. I think it's this choice, right? And it's not that you want to, from my perspective, it's not that you want to spread this thing like you want to influence people to tell them, you should believe in God. It's more like you have this choice of what you want to put your convictions in. You want to have a choice of what you want to put your faith in,
Mhm.
and I think that's what faith should be, really.
I think I definitely would agree that, you know, we should be free to choose. I think, is it necessary to put your faith in something?
Is it necessary?
Mm.
My opinion, yeah, because I think
Sorry, go ahead.
the if you don't have, or not if you don't have, but I think it's necessary to, if you want to accomplish stuff, right? You want to put your faith in something, even if it's yourself.
And what does it mean to put your faith in something?
To have, like, without a doubt, some form of not belief, but like a strong feeling that whatever it is that you want to accomplish can be done through that thing that you put your faith in. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think so. So you use faith in order to maintain confidence that you can achieve something, you can achieve your goals.
Yes, yeah. That would be how I'd put it as well, yeah.
Is faith a good way to build your confidence in that way?
Yeah. When you say confidence, do you mean like your personal confidence?
So if I was to try to achieve a goal and I wanted to understand if I was going to achieve that goal, I I guess I could use faith just to believe on faith that I was going to achieve that goal.
Yeah.
But there might be other ways that I could use to understand whether I was going to achieve the goal or not.
Like
Um,
like how, for example?
so, for example, I could test my ability. I could measure my past successes. I could look at how other people have achieved the same goal.
Mm,
I could reflect on how well I think I honestly understand the problem and whether or not I have confidence in my solution based on my past experiences.
okay. But then wouldn't I'd say that, in my opinion, I'd say that you're putting your faith in that concept of testing or your previous experiences. So I think fundamentally at some point everyone puts their faith in something.
Mm-hmm. I can see that being a way people might use the word faith. So, for example, if I was going to try to break the world record high jump, Olympic record, high jump record, right? I could I could have faith that I'm going to be able to do it, right?
Yeah.
I could just and there's me, 44-year-old Will, overweight, balding, not very well exercised, but just purely on faith attempt to
Yeah.
achieve this goal, right? And it's unlikely, I would think, to succeed on that basis.
Yeah. Because you're overweight.
So even no, do you think that faith alone would be ever sufficient, even if I knew the exact right God to believe in and I prayed and I had, let's say,
No.
religious faith as distinction?
No.
It's wouldn't be
At
sufficient.
times it's not just faith alone, right? It's I think, yeah, with Christianity in the Bible, not that I read much of it, but uh there's this part where they say faith without works is dead, right?
Right.
So it's not just the believing. I'd say it's necessary, but you also need to put in the work. It's also up to you. It's not like, hey, I have faith that if I jump off a cliff, I'll land on my feet. Um,
Right.
but it doesn't make sense that you're able to do stuff without putting in your own input, right? Your own conscious, like, thinking.
So thinking about the high jump situation, if I was to if I was to do nothing but pray to the right God, it still wouldn't allow me to make the high jump.
Yeah.
So that now I start to train and pray, and let's say through diligent prayer and diligent training, I still wasn't able to make the high jump. Right?
Yeah.
What would that mean? Do we think about the faith component there?
It's kind of hard to say. It's kind of hard to say, right? I think that's the point. That's the point where people start to question, right? What is it? Why it is you want to believe in a God, right? And why it is you want to have faith in whatever it is you have faith in. But I'd say the meaning you take from that is up to you.
Sure.
At that point, you kind of make your decision there. If you want to base it on, hey, was it I didn't put enough work in, or hey, I just didn't have enough faith in myself, or faith in God. Yeah.
And then imagine a scenario where there's an atheist trains extremely hard,
Yeah,
and is able to break the record, right? New world record holder, atheist Jim,
yeah.
whatever his name is. Why would this theoretical atheist who theoretically achieved this goal, why do you think he was able to achieve it without, do you think it would be possible? That's the question, I guess. Is it possible for somebody who doesn't believe in God, doesn't pray or have a religious faith to achieve their goals?
Yeah, that's definitely true. That's evident, right? There's so many successful people in the world who are able to achieve the goals that they need, and they're atheists. They don't put their faith in God. They're more like you said, they put or kind of test. It's hard for me. I can't speak for what they have done to achieve those goals, but it's definitely true that, there's many atheists who are successful or who don't have to put their faith in something to achieve your goals. So it's completely up to choice at this point. Yeah.
And then I guess lastly, if somebody who did have a religious faith was able to make the high jump, did they have to work less hard at training than the atheist?
So if the person who does believe, hasn't put a lot of training, but they still did better than the atheist, is that what you?
No. Let's say the atheist and the religious person both were able to clear the same height miraculously. I see. Would I use the term miraculously advisedly? Would the theist, or the person who believed in God, who prayed and had faith, would they have had to work less hard to achieve that goal? Is some of that achievement not because of them, but was actually because of God?
The attribution. Some of that work would also be so a lot of it could be attributed to themselves, actually, the work they put in. And in this faith element, I suppose you could see how without that, if you make that comparison, that they both did the same amount of work, more or less. Maybe they were just lucky.
That's certainly possible.
Yeah, but no, I see what you mean. You're able to draw this comparison where they've both done the same amount of work. What impact did faith have in that situation? For me, I think it's probably there's also the mental aspect to it.
Right.
So maybe having that faith gave them the extra push to do what they needed to do, or at least stick to performing the same amount of work.
That's very possible. Yeah. Now we're using the term faith in the sense of like a conviction, like a drive to continue, right? You could have faith in presumably lots of different things and still get that same drive, right?
Yeah, definitely.
So from all of these different scenarios that we've explored in this conversation,
Hmm.
it seems like faith isn't accounting for much of a difference in the outcome at the very least.
Yeah, if you compare, if you're drawing like comparisons between people who have faith and or people who believe in God and people who don't believe in God. Yeah.
And it feels like the only thing that the faith component could do here would be to take away some of the credit for the work that was being put in, right? Like that's all it could do is somehow take some of the credit away from the athlete who believed,
Yeah.
and sort of add it to the God column.
Yeah.
And actually, so, I think that might be interesting.
Yeah. No. Yeah. That seems like a thing that. Yeah, that is true. It kind of puts you in this position where you're looking at it and you say, did I accomplish this through my own? I mean, it's very likely that you could say, yeah, that yeah, I did it because I put the work in.
Mm,
But if you do have faith, people will they'll say, oh yeah, I'll take this attribute and I'll say that was because of God
mm.
why I was able to accomplish what I did. And then there's that I guess that tick box or you know this idea of offering the credit towards a deity or God.
Mm.
Yeah.
In some ways, is it possible that a belief in God could make your life less fulfilled and happy?
Yeah. There's a possibility as far as I can see. Less fulfilled. That's definitely true because I mean I can't draw examples, but I
Mm.
can see how based on your like ultimate reliance on faith, how you could easily miss out on or if you have a misconception of what faith actually is, and it's kind of like a blind following kind of thing,
Mm.
which is what I think religion is, to be honest.
Mm.
It kind of leads you to miss out on what the real importance of living a fulfilled life is. But yeah, it, that definitely does happen. But at the same time, I think it's also true that it can be missed. You can miss out from having faith, but at the same time, I think faith also can add value to your life. There's also many like examples of that. People who have faith and they use that to drive whatever hardships they might face in their own living circumstance.
That's cool. I got you. So,
Yeah.
what as an atheist, my whole life, what do you think I'm missing out on? And that sounded accusational. I don't mean it to sound like that at all. Like honestly, how would you, what would you feel like I would be missing out on
Okay.
through not having a faith?
Right. What do I think you'd be missing out on? If you were to like say something like that to somebody, which I don't think there's a real need to, because I mean, yeah, everything's like up to your own choice, right?
Sure.
But what kind of benefit faith has in my life? I'd say it adds value only in the sense where if you're the type of person, right, that doesn't have the mental like fortitude to like deal with certain situations, it,
Mm.
it kind of adds that sense of mm, I can see how it can be ignorance if it feels like ignorance in some cases, but it can add that sense of like you kind of leave your problems to someone else in that kind of does it kind of feels like you're leaving your problems to someone else
I hear you. Yeah.
to kind of like focus on what you actually want to accomplish.
I feel I don't know if you heard my conversation with Herb guy. that I
Right.
had a few months ago, and I when I spoke to him, he expressed a very similar sentiment,
Okay.
and I suggested that he was using God in this example as a synonym for hope.
Right.
Like it was a way in which he could relate to just the idea of hoping, even if there wasn't much that he could justify that hope on. He still
Yeah.
wanted to hope that things would get better.
Yeah.
Does that feel like it might be similar to the
Yeah.
way what you're describing?
Yeah. Similar. Yeah. In the same. Yeah. I think it's the same way.
Hello,
Definitely.
Emma. Sorry. in the middle, that was entirely on me. That is entirely on me. I apologize. Responding to chat mid. It's the overlays. I didn't realize that was turned on, but totally
Oh.
valid.
Yeah. Yeah. Here I was thinking you're talking to Emma across the room or something.
No, even worse than that. That's so. Yes, I can understand. What would your life look like if there was no God? Do you think? Like if it was 100% not true, like how would your life look different?
Honestly, I think it'd be the same. But wait, are we talking about the concept of disbelieving in God, or the fact that there is no God or something? I'm not sure.
Yeah, imagine there was no God at all,
Right.
but you were still you and thought things you did, but like it just wasn't true. Is there any difference between?
I honestly think it'd be the same. Yeah.
Gotcha.
Yeah. I don't think I put that much emphasis on my life in that regard to that expert. I think it's just like a thing that I believe in, in times
Gotcha.
when I need it. Yeah.
Do you feel like maybe is it possible, and I really don't know the answer to this, but is it possible that the idea that that God is a place that you can go to find hope in what might feel like hopeless situations, are there other things that you could reflect on, do you think, that might be easier to believe in than 50%?
Oh yeah, I see what you mean. Yeah, possibly. I mean, it depends on the person again, but I can definitely see how someone would probably like move from that point and then go to, I don't know, your friend, right? You can put your trust in your friend or your faith in your friend, and you have 100% belief that they can solve, I don't know, say your friend is Superman. You have you have 100% faith that Superman will save you no matter where you are
right
in the world. But yeah, I can definitely see how there definitely is other things that you can put your faith in. But I think for me personally, it's kind of just a matter of circumstance that I've like chosen this path, and like I've just decided to stick with that.
If it wasn't true, if it could be proven, and I don't think it could, but if it could be proven for sure that God wasn't real, do you think you'd still find comfort in praying and acting as if he was real?
That's a really good question. Do I think? I reckon I could. Yeah, I mean, because at the moment, I'm kind of like, no one can prove it, right? No one can actually certify that God is real or not. But
I don't know
at the
anybody.
moment, yeah, it's kind of like it would be the same thing. No, it wouldn't be. I mean, if you were to able to 100% confirm that God is not real, I reckon I could still put my faith in, because it's just at the end of the day, it's up to your own belief.
It feels very similar to almost like meditation, like a way of reflecting and thinking about the world rather than an actual belief in something.
Yeah. So I guess in that sense, yeah, if that was the case, then it'd be kind of like I'd be more I think I'd drive myself more towards that aspect.
Do you think it might be more useful to see it as a meditative practice rather than see it as communicating with a deity, a god that you're only 50% confident is real?
Yeah, yeah. In my case, yeah, it would be definitely, yeah. I
Tusk,
think so.
I have to say this has been a fantastic conversation. I've really enjoyed it. And
Yeah,
I think I would definitely say like and yeah, I'm happy to carry on just to be clear, but I think as far as like an SE style conversation goes, like that's probably about as far as you'd want to go in a normal conversation.
yeah.
But I think that was really fun.
Yeah, that was really good. Like the insights. I've honestly only had this kind of conversation with people who are like hardcore Christians, right? And it's kind
Right.
of like a one-sided view. So I think coming from someone else, right, who's on the other side, who doesn't believe in God, I don't know why I say it like that,
It's fine.
but yeah, exactly. But it's a good insight where I'm able to like reflect on why exactly I do believe in God. I think I've actually reached a good point in my head where
That's
it makes
cool.
sense. Yeah,
That's cool.
cool.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I'd love to talk to you about it some more. And I think I'd also I think more importantly for me is like I think I guess one of the reasons why I feel it's useful to talk about these things is because there are aspects I think of believing in God and using God as a synonym for hope, which I think is are 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 not ideal.
mm,
One of them is like if you remember back to the example of the high jumper,
hmm,
the idea that in some ways it takes away some of the credit for solving the problems yourself,
yeah,
um, in a way that might make you less confident that you are really able to do that, and
yeah,
where that confidence might really actually be useful to you.
yeah,
And that's one thing. And the other thing, and this was a conversation I'd had with a Catholic or formerly Catholic friend of mine, um, who asked me why it mattered that they believed. And I think the main answer I could give them, because they they were quite well, I mean they're now no longer a Catholic, so that tells you how how strong their conviction was, right?
mm,
But they wanted to hold on to it more or less for sort of they felt it was useful, it was comforting to them, that it added moral strength to them, and they found it useful. And they said, well, why would I want to take that away from them? And my answer to that person was that I think when bad things are going to happen to everybody, like at some point, like,
yeah,
and I hope most people don't have to go through really bad things, but maybe you do, right? And maybe
mm,
when you do those things, it's going to be all the more difficult if your framework for dealing with those things has to encompass the idea that God is doing this to you on purpose. Like somehow
yeah,
God is, if God can be helpful for the answer, then you have to understand that God therefore must in some way be responsible for the problem to begin with. So
yeah,
wondering why God did this to you is a problem. And secondarily,
yeah,
when truly bad things happen to you, that can also be a point where that problem becomes significant
yeah,
enough to you then no longer believing in God. And then not only have you
yeah.
got a tremendously difficult emotional challenge ahead of you, but you've also lost your tool that you use
Mm,
to address these
use,
kinds of
yeah,
challenges.
yeah, yeah. Definitely see how that works. Yeah,
So to me, I think it's even in this sort of emotional space where you're hardly a sort of Bible thumping Christian. You're not running around doing
yeah,
the American evangelist type routine.
mm,
But even in a sort of less evangelist form, I
hmm,
still think it's quite not dangerous. Maybe it's not dangerous, but an unhelpful idea, I think.
mm. Not a very unhelpful way of thinking, basically.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That can be sometimes detrimental to yourself. Yeah.
Yeah.
I definitely see that 100%, especially with like people that I know who are more devout, right? And they'll like, even my grandma, she'll say these really weird things to me that I sometimes have to shake my head. I'm like, what are you on about? She'll say like, with Christ you got to take this narrow road, but without Christ is a broad road. I was like, wait, what? Why would a narrow road be less better than a broad road?
You're still walking down one. The length
Yeah.
of the road is the same. It's just how much space you have to either side.
Yeah. So I mean, it's just stuff like that it kind of just pushed me towards that, just this more free thinking of kind of like,
Right.
if there is, then might as well. But yeah, like I say, that's probably why my conviction is 50-50 and also like 85 only if I'm being really hopeful.
Gotcha.
I think that would be it. Yeah.
There's a philosopher, and I don't know what else he does. I think he's a university professor, but a chap called, Daniel Dennett, who coined the term adipity. Adipity, yeah, and adipity is a statement that sounds deep and profound, but really isn't. And I'm trying to gain. You may have heard me talk about it yesterday, but I'm trying to gain traction for the idea of a micro bullshit, which is when somebody invites you to agree to an opinion that seems like on the face of it to be nonsense, but it's so small as to not warrant really picking them up on. So I like the idea of a micro bullshit.
Micro bullshit.
That's it. Yeah. It's like, oh, I'm feeling very spiritual today. What the fuck are you talking about? But like,
that's micro bullshit.
It's a micro bullshit because they invite you to just let them make that statement without challenging it.
Yeah.
And at the same time, you kind of don't want to, but it's not big enough that you feel like it's worth going into. Like, so I'm going to call those things micro bullshits. Tusk, I've had an absolute pleasure, mate. I think this seems like a good time to wrap it up. But like, I've really enjoyed this, and I'm really up for doing this again sometime. I'd especially like to explore perhaps like at a later date. We could talk about different ways in which people can find comfort without God, perhaps, and and different ways of coping. But honestly, this has been a great conversation. I've really it went exactly as well as I'd hoped or thought it would go, which is nice.
Yeah, I enjoyed it. Yeah. Thanks.
Cool, awesome. Well, I guess we should look for those people who are on Twitch. We should do a little mini raid. But for now, I'm going to go to the end credits section. So we're going over. But yeah, thanks, Tusk. It's been great.
Thank you, chat. Emma, Bloody Nine, Charisma, Serio.
Check you out. You credits in chat and everything. I'm impressed. I'm so rubbish at this. So yeah, thanks everybody. I really appreciate it, especially Tusk for you being brilliant and very generous joining us today. We will do a little mini raido. I'm not sure if we're going to raid. Let's see who's around. I don't normally end it this time. This is kind of odd. Oh, I guess we're going to raid more Risu. Let's raid more Risu.
Cool.
Yeah, I mean, I probably better head that way anyway. And Tusk, you're a moderator on Mauritius channel, so frankly, you got to get it back to work, right?
Oh, okay, yeah. Just rat me out there.
Yeah, that's it. So everybody, thank you very much for taking part in this. I understand that Twitch is and frankly YouTube and a lot of these platforms are not the sorts of spaces where these conversations happen very often. So the fact that people are here listening to this is a real pleasure and a privilege. So I really appreciate you all. Take care, stay safe, and we'll see you next time. Goodbye.